Welcome to Phoenix Rising with Dr. Z. This podcast is all about conversations about healing and rising from the ashes of your grief and trauma. In this podcast, we will be deconstructing and highlighting the different aspects of grief and loss. I'm your host, Dr. Christina Zampatella.
We're just talking about some materials that are structured and fluid, but things that can help provide containment.
Yeah.
Right. Grounding. That's using. We're talking about using art as a tool to help you to soothe, right? To self-soothe. It's very sensory in nature.
Okay.
Right. Like having that anchor, something to focus on.
Anchor.
Right.
What do you mean by that?
So, is it okay if I use like meditation as an kind of analogy
Hey,
here?
that's the cool thing about the fact that this is my podcast. We can do
Right.
whatever we want.
Okay.
But yes, no, please do. Because I think a lot of people are like, oh, okay,
Right.
I have at least an idea of what meditation is.
Okay.
Like you sit cross-legged somewhere.
Right. Sure. So, so meditation. Some people think it's about clearing your mind, right? Which is not at all. It's about witnessing, being observer to your experience, right? And so, in mindful meditation, the practice is often to focus on the breath, right? It gives you something to come back to. That's the anchor. In meditation, we call that an object of focused attention. That's the object. It's the breath in that example. And you can use anything as that anchor, right? But it gives you, when you notice that you've become distracted, it's okay. Doesn't mean you've done anything wrong, but you note it, and then you come back to whatever that object is. Art can be used as the object. The breath is common because it's always available to us. It's our ally.
Okay.
But using art that has a sensory component to it, right, that gives you a sensory stimulus that you can focus on, that you can come back to. So that's what we were just talking about with some of this stuff like coloring books, all right, and using structured materials. Just focusing on the sensory aspect of it, and it's going to be something that provides the containment that you don't lose control at the same time, right?
Okay.
Now, art can also be used in more of a reflective, exploratory, symbolic kind of a way as well, finding meaning in things.
Okay.
All right, or creating meaning. So one technique that I think is really cool, I got to really reach back to get these things, is called altered bookmaking.
Altered bookmaking.
It's kind of a different take on a creative journal, an art journal. We talked about journaling, how it could be helpful, right? As a reflective process. I'm not taking anything away from that. I think journaling is great. Writing, though, it's in some ways limiting because it is very intellectual. It doesn't have, I'm not a neurologist, but what I will say is art can stimulate more of your brain than writing does as a form of expression. So you're able to have a similar process with that reflective or exploratory kind of experience that you do with journaling or even dumping, but not simply intellectual, not staying so much in your head.
You're bypassing the filter of thinking about what you want to say.
Exactly. So
and that can be hard in journaling, for sure. Okay.
Yeah. So creative journaling, either just having a sketchbook like this, either leaving it open or having prompts can be great. Altered bookmaking is a form of art where we do literally that. We alter existing books. So it gives you something that's already there to work with. And so there's two kinds of books you can use for that. Traditionally, you use hard back books that are stitch bound, because if it uses glue in the bindings, it can fall apart more easily. This is sturdier. The way
Stitch bound, what does that look like?
So one way you can tell, if you look at it closely this way, you probably can't see on the camera, but if you kind of peel this back, you can see it's kind of scalloped.
Okay.
The pages are folded, and then when you open it up, if you try to find the center of that, there will be, let me go this way, there will be actual thread in there that's holding it together.
As opposed to the glue where
As
you can
opposed to
kind of
the
hear,
glue.
you almost can hear that, right?
Yeah, so I'm trying to find like a spot here that has the stitches. I don't want to waste our time with it, but like basically you find the center of that fold, which in this one's going to be somewhere in here. And as you kind of pull it back, you can see thread in there.
Okay.
If you see that, it's a stitched binding.
Okay,
and
so that's what
stronger.
somebody's looking for.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's That's one. So you want that because it'll hold up better to the materials.
Okay.
On top of that, you need to create some space. So what you do is every few pages you go through to prepare your book, and you rip out several pages at a time.
This is sacrilegious.
Right.
You're killing me.
The thing is, I know some people have this reaction, and that's okay. I get that. This is about repurposing. So if this is a book that's collecting dust somewhere, it's more of like I'm rescuing this and giving it new life.
Oh, good reframe. Oh, look at you. Oh, God, a therapist.
Yeah. Don't take a perfectly good book and destroy it to do an altered book. This is like I'm recycling.
Like, this is my baby book. I'm just going to go ahead. Okay,
yeah.
gotcha. All right.
I like to dig through bins at like secondhand stores. This is a book that no one's ever going to use. I'm not interested in the topic of this book. It's just going to sit here and collect dust. It's going to go to waste. I'm going to rescue it and give it new life and create art with it. Right? So once you do that, you have space in here to create. Now you can do all kinds of cool stuff with altered books. You can do collage work. You can do what's called blackout poetry, which is where you'll kind of just look at a page, skim through, look for words that stand out to you and have a meaning, and then just kind of circle those and create art around it, or just black it out with a black marker. So in that way, you may be able to just make these meaningful associations from something that's already there. So it gives you some structure and some direction.
Right.
Right. This one has no art done in it yet. This is just an example of how to prepare one and what kind of book to use.
Okay.
Also, with altered book making, something that's good to get is called gesso. It's a primer. It's canvas primer. So when you buy canvas, it's not just the cloth. It's typically been primed with this stuff. But you can paint this on anything to make it a surface that can accept all different kinds of art materials. So that's what you usually do is you'll paint the pages with this gesso, and then you can create art on top of it if you want more of a blank slate. So this is good to have too. So that's that kind of book. Also, you can use children's board books. This is one that actually has been altered. So you can create these cool pockets as well with this, or standard books. By cutting things out, you can make these kind of windows. I did this one so that I could kind of make this little thing of colored pencils that you can see no matter what page you're looking at. But I went through and I used, these are great for accepting collage work, so because they're so sturdy because of the pages. So board books are a great one. There's not a ton of pages, right? As much as this, it can be overwhelming to think, I need to get through this whole thing.
Oh, okay.
Right? A board book is a little smaller, but these are ways of reauthoring, right? We're reconstructing literally, we are reauthoring the book in the same way that we reconstruct our own story as we're grieving. So it can be a great metaphorical tool to do your own kind of creative journaling. To do altered book making.
Can you that's kind of cool what you just said. Can you say that one more time?
Yeah.
It's a great way to reauthor
the story, right?
Just like we reauthor our own stories as we're grieving, especially because there's no way of changing the past. The only way we can change the past is to assign different meanings from what we've gone through.
Right.
Hopefully with more resources now, because there's been some space behind that, so, or space between it.
Right.
So this is a way. It's almost narrative.
It's definitely a narrative approach.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Very cool. And if you like that, I just talked about what kind of books we can use, how to prepare them, a couple of techniques, very briefly. But if you want to get into altered book making, there's a lot of great books on altered book making out there that give you all kinds of ideas for techniques and stuff.
There's actually books on. There's actually books on altering books.
Exactly.
Okay.
Which you could find at any bookstore or any big online supplier that's named after a river in South America. So that'll give you some direction if you're interested in exploring altered book making.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I see yarn.
You do see yarn.
I do see yarn.
I love yarn. I was hoping maybe we could do a little bit of finger knitting today.
Let's at least start.
Do we have time for that? I don't know.
I don't even know what time it is.
Yeah.
Yep, do it.
All right, well, I brought some blue for you. I know you like blue. I had more of a greenish one, but there wasn't enough of the bluish green, so it's blue.
I remember you were showing everybody, like when we were recording what goes on here at the center, and you were showing finger knitting, and I, for some reason, just could not seem to, like, I can't even find the beginning of this. Where's the beginning of this?
This one's been kind of wrapped around the sides there, so it's probably tucked in somewhere here.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay, cool. All right.
So that's your skein.
Skein?
Yep.
This is called
I've always
skein?
said skein, kind of like you always said crown. Apparently it's pronounced skein.
Skein. Who knew? All right.
I don't know. I've been calling it a skein for years, but someone corrected me once.
It's a thing.
It's a thing.
A thing, okay.
It's what all the yarn, it's the ball of yarn, basically.
Okay.
So you can put that anywhere. I like to just kind of throw it on the floor.
That's good, because that's where it's going. Okay.
It's easier. It'll go rolling all over the place, but it's easier to kind of pull out more yarn that way.
And I need lots of it.
Right. So finger knitting, actually, like, what is it? Right. So it's a way that we can knit with our hands without any needles, any knitting needles. I'll be honest with you, I don't know how to knit with needles. I don't know how to crochet. I've learned this technique, and I've also learned one you can do with your arms, where you use your forearms. It's called arm knitting. We're doing finger knitting today.
Okay. Oh, gosh, here we go. I know I get this wrong.
This is a great one for self-soothing, for grounding, to practice some mindfulness.
And you do this when you run your groups, too.
Absolutely.
Like at the beginning, where everybody kind of does their thing, and then they get woven together as a way of creating a sense of cohesion within the group.
Yes.
And I think that's super cool.
I love that. I love that technique. It's people usually respond pretty well.
Yeah, they sure do.
Yeah. So first thing we're going to do here is we're going to tie a loop knot. What I like to do is you're right-handed.
Yes.
Okay. Left hand, thumb and pointer finger together, and holding the end of your yarn, hang it over like so.
My right hand is the thumb.
Your left hand is, thumb and pointer finger.
Okay.
Right hand, you're going to
Okay, I'm going to go over, and it's going to go over towards my fingers.
And then you cross that short side of the yarn for the long side.
Like
and
that?
then you reach down, and
you
grab
reach
the
down,
long piece.
and then grab the long piece.
And pull it up through the loop.
And then pull it up through the... Oh
There's
my
your
God,
loop
that's the
knot.
first time I ever got that
Got
right.
it on the first
Yes.
try. Nice.
Don't
There's
tell
your loop
anybody.
knot.
They're
Don't
gonna
do this,
expect a
but if you
lot
pulled
out
it, it
of
would
me.
just come undone.
Okay.
So you tie the loop knot, and you're going to put that on your left thumb.
Okay.
And just kind of pull it so it's snug, but not too tight, just kind of comfortable.
Okay, so I made this a little too... Ooh, okay, got it.
You're good. All right, so now you're going to hold your left hand with your palm up, and you're going to let this hang underneath of it, like behind it, like so. Okay.
Yeah.
And then that's called the tail. You're going to move the tail back as well, out of the way. Cool. Do you mind if I help you for a second?
Of course.
I'm just going to move this here. There we go. Okay. So that's where we want to be to get started.
Okay.
So this is your working yarn. What we're going to do is weave this around the fingers. You're going to go behind the pointer, over top of the middle, behind the ring, over top of the pinky, and then back the opposite way, under, over, and let that hang down. Cool. Now take this loop off of your thumb and move it to your pointer finger. By the way, there are videos of how you can
I was going to say, because we're not going to hear
this.
anything about this on Spotify. They're not going to hear it. Okay.
So now that's casting on. We only have to do that once.
Okay.
And that's actually the hardest part.
Okay.
All right, so what we're going to do next, this step, is how we create our rows of stitches.
Okay.
So taking your working yarn, you're going to go around the pinky and over. Okay. And I like to make sure there's a little space between these loops and that line there. So that kind of like up on your fingers, and these are down here. Good. Now, working your way down, I like to go from the pointer finger down. Grab these two.
Both of them.
Yep, both of them. And you're going to pull them over the top of your finger.
That
That one's a little tough because we don't have as much slack to work with. Then the middle finger, same thing.
And it's this. Did I remember that right?
Yep, and then we just work our way down.
Who knew?
That first row is always a little tighter.
Okay.
And now we do that again. We take the yarn, place it over. Now you want to do this lightly.
Okay.
You don't want to use a ton of tension. That'll make it easier as you start to pull these over the top of your fingers. Gives you more slack.
Okay. Oh, okay, I see.
Got it?
All right, cool.
Yep.
And so this is soothing. Like I know we could sit here and I could just have a conversation. I don't even have to think about it now. I had to think about it before, but I don't have to do that. And then this creates, I wish we had a little, like you said, a little bit more time, but this creates a whole thing, like a long, and you can...
It creates a thing. People always ask me, what is this? What
it's
did I
a
make?
thing.
You
I'm
made
making a thing, and it just keeps growing right down there. So you're saying that, actually something tactile like this.
Right.
And it's soft, too.
And it's soft.
So there might be something soothing about that.
So there's that part of it, right, exactly. The other thing is, this is, you're following steps, right? You don't have to think too much about this. about what am I creating? Where am I going to put this line? Or how
Right.
am I going to sculpt this piece of this clay?
Right.
It's just, you're just following the steps and it's creating something.
You could be watching TV and
Right.
just kind of, but it
allows
soothing.
you
Yeah.
to focus on that sensory
And you do not
experience,
need
the
an art
repetition.
therapist to,
No,
to
you
teach
could do
how to
this on your own.
Okay. Very
and
cool. See,
yeah, it starts
apparently I've got a scarf.
back of your, yep,
That's
starts to form on the
2
back of your
inches long.
hand there. But yeah, I love when people ask that, what did I make?
I don't know.
It's nothing, right? Like you, not nothing, but it's not creating a typical, like, oh, I've knitted a scarf or a hat or mittens. It's not something that's functional.
Right.
You made a thing.
You made a thing.
Right. But it looks kind of cool. And but that really I think just illustrates how it's not about the product.
Right.
It's about the process.
It's about the product, just like grief.
Exactly.
Right, because there is no product with grief.
There's no product. There's nothing to attain. There's nowhere to go, right, or to be. It's an ongoing process. There's no end to it.
So how do I undo this?
So one thing you could do is you could cast off to save it. We're not going to cast off today. We're just going to unravel.
Okay.
So you can just kind of pull these off of your fingers.
Okay. Pull the loops, and then I ruined all your. And then just
and
it comes right across.
And then
Okay.
it just unravels.
Cool.
And then you wrap it back up. You could reuse the same skein over and over if you wanted to.
Very cool.
Really. So.
It's soft. I like
Yeah.
that.
Fiber arts I think are great because of that tactile part of them.
And you can talk while you're doing it too.
Exactly.
It's like, I think for me, like if I'm drawing or something like that, it like talking at the same time might be a little bit harder, but here I can just, it's almost mindless, but it's soothing at the same time.
Right.
So that's cool. So how can somebody figure out how to learn, like for those people who didn't just see this, but are listening, where can they learn how to do that?
If you go on YouTube and you just type in finger knitting tutorial or how to finger knit,
cool,
videos will pop up.
Perfect.
Same thing with arm knitting. If we didn't do that today, but that's another one. You can just search it and it'll pop up a ton of free videos on how to do it.
Awesome.
So
good. Good. So it sounds like expressive arts or just doing art doesn't have to be expensive.
No.
You just have to figure out how you want to include it in your life.
Absolutely.
So what would be some indicators that maybe it would, maybe art would be something that you could use for a coping skill? Like is there, the person's having a harder day that day, or is there good timing? Is there bad timing? Like, could somebody not do this right after a loss? Should, like, here's 90 questions for you to answer all at one time.
All at once.
But do you follow, does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
So, are there indicators of, what was the initial question? Art.
Sorry.
When someone can use art for coping?
Like, is there a time where it's appropriate and not appropriate? There, that was a better way of saying it.
To me, if you have the time, it's appropriate.
Okay.
Right? Like, it's not something like, I am out and about right now and I'm having a panic attack in the middle of the store. I'm going to whip some yarn out.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So it's something where I think is any time where you can sit down, you have the time to, with the intention of creating, it's appropriate. It can be good for releasing energy and expressing emotion. If you're like, I have a lot of intense emotion, I want to get out, right? To have that healthy way of expressing it, right? For example, a lot of anger, let's fill up the page with those oil pastels, right? Let's get the energy out. Or it can be used for soothing, right? If I'm feeling really upset or sad or anxious, afraid of something, you can use it to soothe yourself. Something like the coloring books or the finger knitting. Great. I'm going to throw out another term here: a transitional activity.
What does that mean?
So if you are doing any kind of other intentional work with your grief, I know we didn't really talk too much about this today, so there's not a lot of context for it, but let's say ritual work, right? You mentioned ritual earlier and how it has that benefit. Well, one of the key characteristics of a ritual, it has a beginning and an end.
Yeah.
Right? Well, after it provides some of that containment. It's helpful afterwards to have an activity that's unrelated to the ritual or to what you were just doing. So it could be something like having a cup of tea, or reading a book,
anything
going for a walk,
soothing.
anything soothing. This could be used as a transitional activity.
When people come into therapy, we talk about what are you going to do when you leave here that's a way to take care of yourself before you like go back to work or you go home and go, have to feed the kids or whatever. Where's that place to kind of provide that soothing space when you're doing like ritual, like journaling, not ritual journaling, when you're doing journaling of any kind, is there, even if it's a minute, like I've had people say, oh, I have a piece of chocolate, and I'm like, oh, well, that's good, you're hitting one of your food groups, that's important to be able to it is, okay, whatever, it is. What are you doing? Or I'm going to take a bath, or I'm going to do this. So you're saying art could be part of that.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't have to be anything fancy.
No.
We don't have to
make it. It could be so simple. Yeah. If you don't have the coloring books, if you have paper and a coloring material and a circular object somewhere in your house, you can make yourself a little mandala, a little circle. You grab a cup or a roll of tape or a plate or a bowl or something, trace yourself a circle on a piece of paper, fill it in with color.
So sometimes people can get really intimidated by art. Oh, I'm a terrible artist, and but I'm hearing you say this isn't about the quality of that. You can draw stick figures if that's really what you want to do. That's not what this is all about.
It's not about the quality. It's not about creating this specific product that looks a certain way. A lot of times we have these what are called schemas. They're mental blueprints, ideas of how something should look.
Okay.
Right? A lot of times those get in the way of just creating freely. Go abstract. Right? If you're worried about, if you find that it's difficult to let yourself just go and just be present with the process, and you're worried too much about this isn't going to look the way I want it to look, then create something that's not representational. It's not supposed to look like a certain object. Just filling something with color and line and shape, tracing something and just creating patterns. We don't need to overthink it.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So as we're kind of wrapping up today, one thing I think is really important is to make sure that our viewers and our listeners have, kind of 3 takeaways.
Okay.
That really make sense as it relates to their grief and relates to the topic that we have. So what would you say are 3 takeaways from today?
Okay. I think one is art is for everyone, right? It's not just for kids. It's not just for artists. Anyone can use art and, experience its benefits. I think another one that we've been hitting on like constantly throughout this podcast today is it's about the process. The process is the most important part, not the product. So focus on the process. Just allow yourself to be present with that.
It's like a parallel process to grief.
Exactly.
It's just the process.
Right.
It's just a different way of expressing it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Process over product.
Okay.
And then the last one, just don't overthink it. All right. Yeah. That's it. I won't say any more because that would be counterintuitive to not overthinking something. Don't overthink it.
So don't overthink it and don't overthinking it.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. Got it. Hey, I just want to thank you so much for coming in. What a unique topic for us to talk about. I have not, in the podcasts that I've been listening to, I have not been hearing people talk about using art in the context of navigating our grieving process. So what a unique opportunity, and the fact that you're able to bring this into therapy the way that you are, and then you have a whole nother, there's all other layers when you're actually using it with a person who's trained as an art therapist. Yeah. So if somebody was interested in trying to find an art therapist, like a person who actually, and that's hard because an art therapist who specializes in grief and trauma is like nailing Jell-O to a tree, but okay, but let's say that they're looking for an art therapist. How would they go about doing that? Okay.
Well, one place you could look is on AATA's website, AATA, the American Art Therapy Association.
Okay.
And they have a directory there by state, so you can locate art therapists in your state. You could try Psychology Today and put in art therapy under the search criteria and see. But again, you don't know whether someone's going to be an art therapist or someone who's saying, I do art therapy, and maybe might have a misconception or misrepresentation of what they're doing.
And so maybe a different experience.
Right. So you're going to be safe if you go through AATA's website.
Okay.
Or come here to the center and you can see me.
With all his spare time. Hey, Hey, thank you again. Thank you so much. I learned, you have an office next to me and I've known you for years and I've learned so much today in just this short period of time. So thanks so much, really.
You're welcome.
And
it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, I hope to have you back for other topics too.
Look forward to it.
Cool. Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you for watching and for listening, and I hope that you found this helpful. Hey, if you have any feedback or follow-up questions, even if it's for Marcus, go on the Center for Grief and Trauma Therapy Facebook page, and you can list questions that you might have that we will be bringing into question and answer episodes every time that we have a set of podcasts that we are recording. You also, at the bottom of this, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can go right underneath and post any questions you might have there, and happy to follow up with the questions that you might have. So thank you for listening or watching. All right.
Thank you for listening to Phoenix Rising with Dr. Z. If you found this podcast helpful, please share it, subscribe, and leave a rating or review wherever you get your podcasts. We want to be a resource for anyone who's experiencing loss, and this is a simple way you can help us spread the word. Check out our show description. There you'll find a link to connect with me on social media, as well as helpful articles and resources.